The name Rob Halford is not only linked to Judas Priest, but it is also seen as the metal god by everyone in the metal world. He is more than just a singer whose high notes can cut right to the heart. He's the live embodiment of heavy metal and a legend that can't be replaced. He has become an untouchable figure in the history of rock with his leather, studs, and roaring Harley-Davidson on stage. But Rob Halford lived a quiet life away from the bright stage lights and fiery, exciting shows that a free man who has been locked up by his own secret for decades. A rock singer whose explosive anthems set the world on fire, but who also had problems with loneliness, drug abuse, and the harsh demands of the music business. He was about to give up everything after falling into the abyss, but he got back up and took back who he was. What made a boy from a working-class family in the West Midlands, England, changed the way heavy metal was played? When Judas Priest was at the top of their game, why did he leave? Why did he come back over a decade later to the cheers of millions of fans? And who would have thought that Halford would have to fight cancer, deal with racism, and face the ghosts of his past in order to finally live his truth? Explore the life of a real metal fighter, a man who fought and won both against the world and against himself. Beginnings. Rob Halford was born on August 25, 1951, in Sutton Coldfield, England. He grew up in Walsall, a West Midlands industrial town. He knew how working-class life worked from a very young age. There were sooty streets, men working in steel mills, and days that kept going over and over again like a never-ending loop. His dad worked with metal, and his mom put together parts in a workshop. There was no difference in the Halford family's resources. Everyone had to be thrifty to keep their life safe because they lived in a small council house. Even though Halford came from a working-class home, he was not like the other kids his age that he didn't want to do physical work or play games like most of the boys in town. As an alternative, he was always interested in music. He felt like the rock and roll music on the radio took him to a new world where sound could express feelings. He was first moved by artists like Little Richard, Elvis Presley, Janis Joplin, and especially Freddie Mercury. They made him want to hold a microphone and perform on stage. But it wasn't easy to follow those kinds of dreams in Walsall. People thought men should be tough, strong, and practical. A sensitive boy with a love for music like Halford was quickly made fun of in a society that valued stability over creativity. At school, he was picked on because he didn't like things that men usually like. Halford could have tried to fit in, but he decided to pull away into himself instead. He got comfort from music and would listen to and sing along with the sounds he liked for hours. Halford always loved music, but he never thought he could make a living from it. When he became an adult, he had to deal with the stress of making money. Before he could start making music, he worked a lot of different jobs to make ends meet. One of the stranger ones was directing an adult movie theater. Although not something he was proud of, it did help him get by. Halford had a strong belief that he was meant for something bigger. Even though he didn't enjoy the job he was doing, he felt freest when he was listening to music. At that point, though, it was still just a dream. He wasn't sure how to make it happen. He only knew that he couldn't stay in a small town and hate his job all his life. Halford needed to break out of the never-ending loop of daily life, and it came to him in a strange way. His sister Sue Halford put him in touch with Ian Hill, who plays bass in a small band called Judas Priest. This meeting would change Halford's life forever, turning him from a dreamer in Walsall to a heavy metal hero. That stuff would happen later, though. All he knew at the time was that this could be the way to the world he had always dreamed of. Beginners in their careers. When Rob Halford joined Judas Priest, the band was still a small, failing unit trying to find its way in a rock scene heavy with big names. Everyone in the band knew they had found the missing piece as soon as Halford walked into the practice room. He had a powerful, commanding voice and an amazing ability to control high notes. Halford showed up at a time when Judas Priest was still working out its sound. They didn't have a sound that was very different from other rock and blues acts at the time. Halford wasn't just a great singer, though he was very creative, open to new ideas, and eager to push the limits of music to their fullest. Using head voice and falsetto was one of his most important accomplishments during this time. It would later become a trademark of Judas Priest and an important part of heavy metal itself. Halford played his first live show with Judas Priest at Townhouse Wellington in Shropshire in May 1973. It was not a big stage. No bright lights or tens of thousands of screaming fans. Still, Halford sang as if he were in a huge stadium, with an electric intensity that made his voice soar. The raw energy he brought to the stage drew people in right away. He had never done it before, and it was also the start of a new era for Judas Priest. After practicing and playing in small places for months, Judas Priest started getting noticed. In 1974, they put out their first album, Rock'n'Rolla, which was their real start in the music business. But the record didn't become a big hit right away. The band's sound still had a lot of blues and hard rock in it, but they weren't quite as heavy metal as they would become. The production of the album was also bad, so it didn't fully catch their sound. Judas Priest didn't give up even though Rock'n'Rolla didn't have the success they had hoped for. Halford and the rest of the band knew they had a long way to go and that they could only get there by sticking with it. They played non-stop, in bars, small theaters, and any other place that would have them. For Halford, this was a turning point in his life, full of difficulties that were necessary for his growth. He not only worked on his stage appearance, but he also started to make an image that would come to represent an entire genre. As a child, Halford started to build his famous style while performing on small stages. He stopped wearing normal rock and roll clothes and tried wearing leather, studs, and clothes that looked like they belonged on a biker, a style that came from underground movements, but one that perfectly captured Judas Priest's rough, angry energy. No one could have known that this style would later become so important to heavy metal that it could not be separated from it. When Judas Priest's second record, Sad Wings of Destiny, came out in 1976, it was a big turning point. They became known after this record, which changed the way they sound. Halford first showed off all of his singing skills on songs like Victim of Changes, where he gave a dramatic performance full of sharp high notes and smooth vocal changes. It was clear that this record was very different from Rock'n'Rolla. Judas Priest moved away from blues rock and towards something heavier, sharper, and more novel. Halford went from being a young man running an adult movie theater to being the lead singer of a band that was about to blow up and define a whole genre. That being said, the climb to the top was far from over. Judas Priest was only beginning to do well and rise. When Sad Wings of Destiny came out in 1976 and became a big hit, Judas Priest was no longer a little-known band. Fans and reviewers alike started to pay attention to them, but they still had a long way to go before they could take over the heavy metal scene. Not only did Rob Halford improve Judas Priest's music, he also helped shape the image and identity of heavy metal, setting the bar for a whole generation. By the late 1970s, Judas Priest had already put out a number of groundbreaking records that took their sound to new heights. The band got heavier and faster between Sin After Sin, 1977, and Stained Class, 1978, with Halford's high, piercing screams becoming the main attraction. But Killing Machine, 1978, which came out in the US as Hellbent for Leather, was a big turning point. This record not only set heavy metal apart from the blues rock styles of the previous 10 years, but it also made Halford's leather and stud style a full-fledged fashion statement. Halford was a unique metal hero because of his scary biker jackets, black leather outfits, and the famous picture of him riding onto the stage on a Harley-Davidson. Judas Priest's golden age was just getting started, though. British Steel, which Judas Priest released in 1980, is one of the most important albums in heavy metal history. While some of their earlier records had more complicated songwriting, British Steel was direct, powerful, and very sharp, just like the blade it was named after. Judas Priest is one of the best metal bands of all time, with hits like Breaking the Law, Living After Midnight, and Metal Gods becoming songs for metal fans all over the world. This was the moment when Halford turned into the metal god, a name that would always be associated with him. In the 1980s, Judas Priest had a tremendous amount of fame. Point of Entry, 1981, Screaming for Vengeance, 1982, and Defenders of the Faith, 1984, were all big hits for Judas Priest and helped them become one of the most important heavy metal bands of the time. Halford's vocals on songs like Electric Eye, You've Got Another Thing Coming, and Freewheel Burning were some of the best ever. They all showed off his signature powerful, icy tone and unmatched high-range skill. On the 1986 record Turbo, Judas Priest tried out a more modern sound by adding synthesizers and making the music more radio-friendly. The record caused arguments among longtime fans, but it sold well and introduced Judas Priest to a new audience. 2 years later, though they went back to their pure heavy metal roots with Ram It Down, 1988, and, most notably, Painkiller, 1990, which is generally thought to be one of the best heavy metal albums ever. In Painkiller, Halford also sang at the very top of his singing range. Even the most experienced singers were amazed by the earth-shattering screams on the title track, which set the standard for extreme high-range metal singing. In spite of this, just as Judas Priest was hitting new heights, something unexpected happened. In late 1991, Halford did his famous entrance to a show in Toronto by riding a Harley-Davidson onto the stage. That night, though, a problem with the equipment made him crash into the drum riser. They knocked him out right there. His nose was broken when he woke up, but he still finished the show. It wasn't a coincidence. That showed how much Halford cared about his songs and his fans. At the same time, though, stress and pressures from his work were starting to suffocate him. When Rob Halford suddenly quit Judas Priest in 1992, the end of a glorious chapter that had run almost 20 years. Heavy metal fans were shocked when he left. Everyone in Judas Priest couldn't imagine the band without Rob Halford. Halford, though, wasn't just into music. He also had to deal with his own inner demons and facts that he had hid for too long. After leaving Judas Priest, the metal god's journey was far from over. He was looking forward to a new chapter that would be full of difficulties and real freedom. One-person show. Rob Halford's departure from Judas Priest in 1992 shocked not only the band, but also the worldwide heavy metal scene. The idea of Judas Priest without Halford was unthinkable, and no one knew if he could keep up his legendary standing without the band that had made him famous for 20 years. But this wasn't just a musical choice for Halford. It was a journey for him to find himself again. Halford left Judas Priest right away and started Fight, a heavy metal band with a rougher, more aggressive sound that was affected by the rising groove metal and thrash metal styles in the early 1990s. Scott Travis, who stayed with Judas Priest as drummer, Brian Tilsey and Russ Parrish, guitars, and J.I. Jade out the first record by Brown. Fight was called War of Words and came out in 1993. It was a risky move for Halford to move away from Judas Priest's original style and toward a heavier, more modern sound that fit with the times. War of Words got good reviews, showing that Halford was still a major force even when he wasn't with Judas Priest. His voice became more aggressive and intense in songs like Into the Pit, Nailed to the Gun, and Immortal Sin. These songs showed that he wasn't just the metal god of the 1980s, but that he could also change and grow with the next age of metal. Luckily, the Fight didn't last long. Their first record, Mutations, came out in 1994, and their second, A Small Deadly Space, came out in 1995. In 1996, the band broke up. But Halford wasn't done trying new things. He formed an industrial metal project called 2WO with John 5 in the late 1990s. 5 would later become the guitarist for Marilyn Manson and Rob Zombie. It was part of the growing industrial metal trend, which at the time was led by bands like Nine Inch Nails and Ministry. Voyeur's 1998, the band's only record, was produced by Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails and had a cold, effects-heavy sound that was very different from Halford's traditional metal roots. In the end, the album did not do well in the stores, and the idea was quickly shelved. Halford's first two projects after leaving Judas Priest didn't last long, but that didn't mean his career was ending. He was, in fact, looking for a way to get back to his roots. He finally made the choice that fans had been waiting for in 1999. He went back to classic heavy metal. After forming the band Halford, Rob Halford's 2000 album Resurrection was hailed as a real rebirth in the heavy metal world. With Resurrection, Halford made a strong case that he had not lost his edge. Also, it was a straight answer to those who didn't believe him. With a piercing scream, the title track, Resurrection, opened the record. It was like Halford was telling everyone that he was back. His life story, from being poor to becoming a heavy metal hero, was told in the song Made in Hell. On the song, The One You Love to Hate, Iron Maiden worked with Bruce Dickinson, making it a famous collaboration between two of the best metal vocalists of all time. Halford released another album, Crucible 2002, after the success of Resurrection. It continued his modern heavy metal style while keeping true to his traditional metal roots. He also put out a live record called Live Insurrection February 2001. which had both his solo work and classic Judas Priest hits. This showed that he was still an important part of heavy metal's history. Halford was successful as a single artist, but he still felt like something was missing. He could sing great songs and be on stage, but he couldn't hide the fact that Judas Priest was his home. Some people thought that Judas Priest would get back together in the early 2000s, but nothing was official until February 2003, when Halford finally joined again after being away for more than a decade. His return was a huge deal for everyone in the metal world, not just Judas Priest. There were millions of fans around the world who couldn't wait for this moment. The metal god would finally stand with his brothers again. It was clear that Halford had found his way back to where he belonged when Judas Priest released Angel of Retribution February 2005, the record that marked the band's reunion. Halford's solo work may not have been as successful as his time with Judas Priest, but it did show an important part of his artistry. His constant drive to improve and reinvent himself, that it was important to him that he always stayed true to himself, even when he made mistakes or did well. He wasn't just a singer getting back together with his old band when he finally joined Judas Priest. He became famous by taking back his throne. Everyday life. For heavy metal fans, Rob Halford has always been like a god, strong, in charge, and with a voice that could blast through the air like a sound weapon. But under all the leather, studs, and fiery stage acts, he was a man who had been through unbearable pain, inner struggles, and a lifetime of fighting to be himself. Halford was born and raised in a society that held homosexuality in very low regard. He knew from a young age that he was different, but he could never say it out loud. When he was young, he was always afraid that if he came out, he would be found out, rejected, and his career could be ruined. When he joined Judas Priest, a band in a genre dominated by hypermasculine imagery and a strong macho society, this fear got even worse. For a long time, Halford hid his real name to protect his job and the reputation of Judas Priest. He later said that this made him feel alone and cut off from his own life. To get away from the crushing stress, he turned to drugs and drinks, hoping to temporarily ease the emotional weight. It's funny that while Judas Priest was reaching new heights in the 1980s, Halford was getting more and more addicted to drugs and depressed, but he still had an unstoppable presence on stage. Through 1986, things had hit a very bad point. Halford almost passed out from taking too many drugs, being awakened by that event. He knew that this way of life was not good for him. He decided to take back his life, so he went to rehab and started the hard process of getting clean. It was a long and hard trip, but he made it to the end. He was stronger than ever when he went back on stage, but he still wasn't free inside. In an MTV interview in 1998, Halford finally decided to say that he was gay. That event altered his life for all time. For the first time in decades, he could finally breathe easy and live as his true self. He said he was worried about how people, his fans, and the metal industry would respond. To his surprise, he got a lot of support. Metal fans welcomed Halford with open arms, showing that his music and spirit, not his sexuality, will always be what people remember him for. Halford finally felt free and could enjoy life without fear after coming out. However, finding true love brought the most happiness. Thomas has been Halford's long-term partner since 1991, and he calls her the love of his life. He has found stability and balance in his personal life and work thanks to this relationship. He could finally live a normal life because he didn't have to hide or be afraid anymore. Rob Halford. Not just an icon, not just the metal god. Even though Halford is a famous rock star around the world, his life outside of music is fairly simple. Reading, collecting old cars, and spending time with his pets are some of his favorite things to do. His fierce stage image, where he wears leather, is very different from the way he loves cats and often posts pictures of them on social media. But Halford's life has also had some hard times. During the COVID-19 outbreak in 2020, he was told he had prostate cancer. Even though he started to notice signs in February 2017, it wasn't until 2020 that he was officially diagnosed and had surgery to remove his prostate. He had more fighting to do. He had to go through radiation treatment in 2021 because more cancer cells were found. Later, he also had to have an appendectomy because the cancer was still in its early stages. Still, Halford never gave up in these fights. He was very sick, but he stayed strong, kept singing, and stayed dedicated to his music. And when they finally said he didn't have cancer, it wasn't just good news for his health. It was also a sign of how strong he was. Right now, life and memory. Rob Halford still shows that age doesn't change the spirit of a metal god at age 73. He has been playing heavy metal for over 50 years and shows no signs of slowing down. He keeps a busy routine that includes touring with Judas Priest, going to honorary events, and hanging out with other metal fans. A big moment in Halford's career will happen in 2025, when he and Judas Priest go on the Shield of Pain tour to celebrate the 35th anniversary of their famous record Painkiller. This album, one of Judas Priest's most important, shows Halford's vocal prowess at its best. His ferocious high-pitched scream set the bar for metal singers for years to come. Starting in Hammer, Norway on June 14, 2025, the tour will go to Oberhausen, Germany, on July 20, 2025. On the other hand, Halford has made it clear that the band will not play the whole Painkiller album on this trip. Instead, they will choose a few classic songs to give their fans the best experience possible. Even though Judas Priest is already on tour, they will also be at Resurrection Fest 25 in Spain starting in June with other big names in the metal scene. They are also going to be co-headlining a tour with shock rock great Alice Cooper, which will be an unforgettable show for fans all over the world. Halford has had an impact on many areas besides the stage. He will be at the Extreme Music Awards at Empire Live in Albany, New York, on January 11, 2025. This is an event that honors metal, punk, and hardcore acts. Being at the event makes him even more of a pioneer in the music business, not only as a legend, but also as an example for upcoming acts. Halford stays very busy on social media when he's not making music. He posts about his personal life, behind-the-scenes moments, and his beloved pets. He is very interested in cats and often posts pictures of them. He also tells his friends to help animal rescue groups. Even though Halford has reached every artistic goal a person could have, he has no plans to quit. During a recent interview, he made it clear that Judas Priest will not be retiring. No changes were made to the original sentence, as it does not require editing. I will sing until my body stops letting me. This sentence perfectly captures Halford's eternal spirit as an artist who lives and drinks heavy metal. Halford has been in the heavy metal business for more than 50 years and is not only the voice of Judas Priest, but also one of the most important people in the history of the genre. Not only has his music and performances helped shape and elevate the genre, but so has his signature way of dressing, which metalheads all over the world use to describe themselves. It's not just Judas Priest that makes great albums like British Steel, Screaming for Vengeance, and Painkiller. They're important parts of the past of rock and metal. In heavy metal culture, the picture of Halford riding a Harley-Davidson onto the stage while wearing studded leather is still one of the most famous scenes. But Halford's unbreakable spirit is what he leaves behind most. He has been through fear, social shame, addiction, and sickness, but he still stands tall and strong. A real heavy metal warrior, he's not only a music great, he's also a symbol of bravery, strength, and being yourself. Rob Halford's name will always be linked to rock music as long as Judas Priest tours, and their famous songs fill stadiums and millions of fans around the world raise their arms to his powerful screams. Rob Halford is a great musician. Who can replace his voice, his famous heavy metal style, or his bravery in living his truth? Tell us what you think in the space below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more amazing stories about rock and metal stars similar to Rob Halford.